In this video, I'm going to talk about some additional functions we have, how to import code that other people have written, and how to use that code. So as usual, I've got a new Pyscripter window open. I'm going to press Control-A to select everything, and I'm going to delete all that stuff it gives me because I don't want that. Now the first function that we ever saw was print. All right, we can print out text, and when we run this code, it shows up in the bottom of the screen. I printed out hello. So print, I've been calling a function. Functions are actions that Python can take. They have to be followed by a set of parentheses, and sometimes you put something between those parentheses, which we call an argument. You may have heard the same terminology in math. Math has functions, and those functions have arguments, things that we pass to the function to tell it how we want it to run. So we tell print to print hello by passing in hello. All right, so there's tons of other functions that we can use that other people have written for us, and that's really handy. So let's see how we can get a hold of those. So if I type in import and then a space and then the name time, time is a library of code that somebody else has written. It's built in. When you download Python, you get access to it, and we can do some interesting things with that. So we can do things like time.sleep, and we need to pass an argument to sleep. I'm going to pass in 1. And I'm going to put a print back on either side of this, and let's see if we can figure out what sleep does. And you can take a guess and see if you're right. All right, so I printed out hello, and then you may have noticed there was a very short delay, and then it printed out the other hello. So sleep is kind of like a pause. This says pause for 1 second. All right, so pause for 1 second. And this is another handy thing I can do. If I use a pound sign, or I guess everybody calls it a hashtag now, I can write a little comment to myself. This is something written in English for the programmer's benefit, as a reminder perhaps, or an explanation to somebody else who's reading the code. And basically it tells Python, the hashtag tells Python, don't try and run this code. This is not actually code, and you'll get confused if you try, right? Because without it, automatically you see this red line, I get an error. So we'll put that back. We can do some other things with time. If I do time.time, no arguments here. Does anybody have a guess at what this is going to do? I'm actually going to print this out. So I'm going to get rid of hello, and I'm going to put time in there. I don't need these spaces on either side, but I'm going to use them just to make it clearer what's happening. And then I'm going to print it again afterwards, and I'm going to make the sleep slightly longer. I'm going to make it 3 seconds. So pause for 3 seconds. And let's run it again. So it printed, and then it printed again. And there was kind of a long delay between those. And now let's take a look at this and see what happened. All right, so time right here gives us the current time. Now, when you look at this, you might not say, this is not like 8 a.m. This doesn't look like a normal time. This is a time in milliseconds, starting from, I should have looked up the actual date, sometime in the 70s. So this is a number of milliseconds since a particular date. Oh, sorry, this is a number of seconds, and then these are, it goes milliseconds and even smaller. I know that this is seconds, or I can infer that it's seconds because I slept for 3, and the last 2 digits here were 10, and then the next time I checked, they were 13. Now you'll notice that it's not perfectly accurate. The decimal here changed a little bit. So it wasn't precisely 3 seconds that passed, and that's because it actually takes the computer some time to run these functions. So those are the 2 main things that we will do with time in some of the early projects. You'll use time.time, you'll use time.sleep. You'll notice, so you've probably already noticed, these all start with the word time. We have to tell it where we're going to get this function from. So time is this function, sleep is this function, but who does that function belong to? Well, it belongs to time. And that's another thing that I want you to get used to, dot. Dot typically means belongs to. Whose time function? The time library. Whose sleep function? The time library's sleep function. All right, let's import some other things and see what we can do with those. Actually, I can import multiple things at a time. I can also import math. There's a library of useful math functions. I can import random to get some random numbers. And this will be a pretty common thing that you do. Much later on, we're going to import Pygame, and we're going to make some games, and this lets us have a screen pop up and draw some images and move them around and things like that. But for now, we're going to just deal with math and random. And the simplest way to do this is to actually just separate these with commas. So I don't actually have to write import each time. So now I'm importing 3 different libraries. And it's okay if I don't use them, but typically we only want to import the things that we're going to use. Okay, so let's not do sleep. Let's get rid of that right now. We'll keep printing out of time just to see that we can do that. And let's look at random very quickly. So I'm going to print out something that random can do. And I'm going to print out random.random. Now again, the function, the action that we're taking, random, happens to have the same name as the library. I know that's a little bit confusing, but there'll be other functions that don't have the same name. So what this is going to do is print out a random number between 0 and 1. So let's look at that. All right, so we printed our time again. And now we've printed out a random number between 0 and 1. It's close to 0.96. Okay, great. Actually, I'm going to get rid of this just to clean up our printing, just to make it easier to read. Now, if I had written random.random not inside of print right here, let's see what would happen. It only prints the one time, right? Because I said print this right here. This is essentially ignored. Nothing happens with this random number generation. Also, look, I got a new random number. That's actually pretty close to the old random number, but that's just a coincidence. All right, so if I don't put this inside the print, I'll never see what the value is. And we're going to talk about variables a little bit later on where I can capture the result of this, but not maybe at the end of this video. All right, another thing I can do with random is I can get a random integer. So rand_int is how to get a random integer, and I can specify what I want it to be between. So I can say like -5 to 20, and this will give me an integer between -5 and 20 inclusive. It includes both of those. So it could be -5, it could be 20. All right, so my random.random gave me 0.76 this time, and random.randint gave me 1. And as you've seen, each time we run this program, it's going to give us different numbers. All right, this time it gave me 0.04. And the random.randint was 2. Let's run it again. And this time 19, 57. So you can see they're all over the place. All right, let's look at math. So some of the handy things you can do with math are figure out the sine or the cosine of things. And actually, if you may have noticed, when you type in math and then a dot, you can see all the functions. It might be hard to see on the video, but this window here shows me all the available functions that belong to math, and there are a lot of them, all right? So if you need to know how to do something like a logarithm maybe, you can find that in here. Pi is one that we will absolutely use a lot. All right, so let's print out something here. So we're gonna print out math.sine of math.pi. All right, so it's getting a little bit confusing here because there's nesting. There's parentheses inside of parentheses. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting the value of pi, right? 3.14, etc. So pi equals 3.14. And then I'm going to get the sine of pi. Now, if you haven't seen sine in math class, this is translating between y values on the unit circle and angles. We're doing angles in radians, not in degrees. Math.pi is the same as 180 degrees. So if you picture a circle centered on the origin, the y value at 180 degrees is actually 0 because it's still on the y-axis. So we should print some random number and then 0. Okay, something a little bit odd happened here. This is super, super close to 0, but not actually 0. This e-16 means this number times 10 to the -16th power. It's a very, very tiny thing. And the reason this happened is that the computer can't perfectly represent pi. It's not actually 3.14. It's 3.1415 something, something, something. It keeps going and going and going and going. So we can't get perfect accuracy. So instead of getting 0, we get something really, really close to 0. Another thing that I want to highlight is that math.pi, it doesn't have any parentheses after it. I said that every single function has to have parentheses after it, right? Print has some parentheses, random has some parentheses, math.sign has some parentheses, but pi doesn't. And the reason for that is that pi is not a function. So not only can we import functions from these libraries, but we can also import variables. So math.pi is actually a variable. I'm going to get rid of this print right here. I can just comment it out with one of those hashtags. I'm going to print out pi down here. All right, 3.141592.6, etc., etc. This is the value of pi, as accurately as the computer is going to represent it. And we can print that out. So variables, which we're going to deal with a ton in this course and very soon, don't have parentheses after them. That's sort of one way that you can distinguish between a variable and a function. Okay, so we looked at time and random and math. I'm going to really briefly show you turtle, because we're going to use that in a lot of projects. And then I'm going to show you one more thing, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, so let's import turtle. And you can see it even suggests what things I can import, right? Is there anything else that starts with T? There's a whole bunch of different things that I can import here. I hardly ever use any of these. I'm showing you the most common ones that I use. So I'm going to import turtle. I'm going to create a turtle, which actually is turtle.T turtle, and I'll explain why that is later on. I'm going to name my turtle Tim. Tim the turtle. I have created a variable. This is the first time I've shown you creating a variable. I've named my variable Tim. You can name yours X. You can name yours Y. Y. You can name yours whatever you want. I'm going to name my turtle Tim because they start with T. And then I use an equal sign. I say this variable is equal to turtle.turtle. Now I haven't really told you what this does yet, but you're going to see in just a second. I'm going to tell Tim. So Tim has some functions, and if I do Tim dot, it'll show me all kinds of functions that Tim has. It'll also show me what variables Tim knows about. I'm going to use Tim dot forward. I'm going to tell him to go forward 100 steps. And then I'm going to tell Tim to turn right by 30 degrees. This is actually in degrees, not radians. I'll tell him to go forward again, and then I'll tell him to go right again, and then I'll tell him to go forward one last time. And then one last thing that you do with turtle, and you don't really do anywhere else, is turtle.quit. This is sort of a way of saying, hey, I'm done, and it cleans up some things in the background. If you don't do this, it can be frustrating because the turtle window that you'll see in a second won't close. Okay, so what am I talking about? Let's run this program. Okay. Oh, I made a mistake. We'll fix that in just a second. Okay, so this is my turtle, this little arrow. This window popped up here. I don't know if you can read it, but it says Python Turtle Graphics. And our turtle started right here. It went forward 100, turned right 30 degrees, went forward 100 more, turned right 30 degrees, and went forward 100 more. All right, we're going to do a bunch more with turtle graphics because it's really nice and easy to draw things on the screen. But this is your little introduction to that. You can create a turtle by setting some variable, doesn't have to be Tim, any variable name equal to turtle.T turtle. This creates the turtle. This is basically a function that says, hey, I want access to a new turtle, and that's what it does. And turtles know how to do things like go forward, turn right, go forward, turn right again, and bunches of other commands that we'll look at more later. Again, dot means belongs to, and turtle.quit is not what I want right here. I'm going to have to look this up. I'm going to keep this in the video, and I will sort of speed through it at the end because I'm going to have to Google it. But there is some command that you want here so that turtle closes nicely. But before I do that, I'm going to go through and look at one other thing. So I'm going to import math again. I'm going to do this in a different way. Suppose I know that all I want is pi. I can say from math import pi. Now I'm only getting access to exactly what I want, and I can print it, and instead of having to say math.pi, which I did before, right? I had to say pi belongs to math. Because I wrote the import like this, I can just say print pi. And this will be pretty easy. It just prints pi, just like that. I can say from random, import random, and also import randint. So I just separated those with a comma. No space needed, but you can, not there, you can put a space in if you want. And then I can print random. Now it's still a function, so I still have to add some parentheses at the end there. And then I can also print randint. And I don't have to say random.randint. And this time we'll go from -100 to 30. All right, so I happen to get 0.42 and -99. All right, so this can be a handy way to write this. It just saves you a little bit of text. I don't like to complicate things, so I almost always just use import. I don't use from, but this is a thing that you can do. If you're feeling particularly lazy, I don't recommend this. You can actually put just an asterisk. That's like Shift 8, an asterisk right here, and it gives you access to everything inside of random. This is sort of powerful but dangerous, so I just reran the code. You'll see I got 0.96 and now -70. This is a little bit dangerous because now I don't know exactly where these functions came from necessarily, and it can get confusing if different imports have functions of the same name. So I like to do it one of the other two ways that I showed you before. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in this video. Feel free to go back to different timestamps and look at things. I'm going to end it with a very quick lookup of how to do that turtle command, and I'm going to stick that in here and speed up this last part. Okay, so what I wanted there was not quit, but done. I want turtle.done. And what happens is then I can close my window very easily. Otherwise, it doesn't let you close the window.